The wind changed before the sky did, and that was the first sign something was wrong. Elena Petrovna felt it on her neck, the way a hunter feels a predator watching from the trees. One moment. The October air near a remote homestead in interior Alaska, not far from the Yukon River flats, was cold but calm. The next moment, the wind snapped sharp from the north, rolling across the frozen tundra like a warning. When she stepped out of her cabin and looked toward the distant ranges, she saw the sky turning a strange purple-gray, the kind her late father used to call the color of trouble. Elena was only 29, a widow for 8 months and tending a small homestead alone. Her nearest neighbor lived 5 miles south across the Muskeg. The world felt huge and empty most days, but not this one. This one felt like the world was shrinking in on her, tightening with every gust of cold air as the first snowflake touched her cheek like a spark of ice. It was October 9th, far too early for a storm of any real strength. Except Elena had grown up in the harsh taiga near Yakuts before moving here with her husband, and she knew early storms were the ones that killed. Beneath her boots, hidden under a thick layer of spruce logs and packed permafrost soil, waited a thing everyone in the scattered settlements had mocked for 6 straight months. The hidden cache, the place she had dug out with her bare hands after her husband died, the place she had built because she could not forget what her grandmother once whispered during a storm that nearly buried their Siberian cabin. Smart people build for the cold before the cold comes for them. Elena had taken that to heart. The hidden cache wasn't much to look at from above, but nothing about the cabin floor hinted that underneath it lay a room 8 feet deep and 14 feet long, walled with stones she had carried from a nearby creek bed. No one in the region built storage under their homes. Folks said it was foolish to disturb the frozen ground, said a woman alone had no business digging holes that deep, said the permafrost in this region shifted too easily. But she remembered Siberian winters far worse than anything Alaska had shown her yet. She remembered stories of families trapped in their own homes because they couldn't reach there with piles. She remembered her grandmother tapping a solid earth wall and saying, "The soil will save you if you learn to respect it." By April, Elena had cut a trap door beneath her kitchen table, wide enough for a ladder and 2 buckets at a time. By June, she had gathered every stone she could carry to build the cache walls without mortar, fitting each piece until it locked into the next with clean precision. By July, she added a second exit, a low tunnel that ran 20 feet to a grass and moss-covered door built into the low ridge behind the cabin. She covered it with sod thick enough that no one would notice unless they stepped right on top of it. People noticed her digging, though, and they talked. Jack Harlan, a trapper with more opinions than pelts, rode by one afternoon and told her the whole thing would collapse by winter. "Ground too unstable here," he said. "You're building your own grave." Elena kept digging. Martha Klein, who ran the distant trading post, told her it wasn't proper for a woman to be alone underground so often. "People will talk," Martha warned. Elena kept digging. But the harshest words came from Reverend Caldwell, a tall man whose sermons were full of warnings about straying from the wisdom of the community. When he found Elena hauling stone in July, he stood in her yard with his hands behind his back. "Some things are not meant to be built by the hands of one person," he said quietly. "You're working against the land itself." Elena only nodded and walked past him. Now, months later, with the sky twisting into bruised blue she feared most, she felt no pride. No, I told you so. Only the cold heaviness that settles in the chest when survival instincts awaken. The temperature dropped faster than she expected. Her small cabin creaked as the wind picked up. Snow began falling in thick, fast sheets, wiping out the world beyond a few feet from her door. She pulled her parka tighter and hurried inside. But for 2 hours she moved with quiet purpose. She brought in as much firewood as she could fit beside the stove. She filled water buckets from the well until her fingers burned from the cold. She checked the ventilation shaft she built herself. 2 narrow wooden pipes hidden inside cabin beams, one pulling fresh air down, one letting stale air out. She packed blankets, dried salmon, jars of berries and roots, her rifle, a lantern, and enough flour for a week into the cache below. By the time she finished, she could barely hear anything but the wind screaming across the roof. Then came a sound sharper than the storm, a pounding on the door. At first, Elena thought it was a tree limb or debris thrown by the gale. But then it came again, harder, followed by a desperate voice shouting her name through the storm. And she dropped the bundle in her hands and sprinted to the door. When she opened it, snow blasted inward. Standing on her porch were two figures she recognized instantly, Martha Klein and her 13-year-old son, Daniel, both white with frost and shaking violently. Their cabin roof had caved in, and the storm was only beginning. Snow swept into the cabin as Elena pulled Martha and young Daniel inside. Their clothes were stiff with ice. Their faces were red and raw. Daniel could barely speak. He stood hunched over, shivering so hard that Elena feared he might fall. Martha's voice broke as soon as the door shut. The roof, it came down. A beam snapped. Snow poured in. We had to run. She clutched her son's arms as if she still feared losing him in the storm. Elena wrapped them both in blankets and pushed them close to the fire. She heated water, gave Daniel a warm cup, and watched the color slowly return to his cheeks. How bad was it? Elena asked gently. Martha shook her head. There's no shelter left. The wind was tearing the rest apart when we ran. We never would have made it another mile in that cold. We only saw your lantern through the snow. Elena felt a pull deep in her chest. She was grateful they had reached her, but she also knew how dangerous the next hours could be. The storm was rising, pushing against the cabin with violent force. The rafters groaned under the pressure. Each gust felt strong enough to lift the whole structure from the earth. The temperature kept falling. Snow piled against the windows until the glass disappeared completely. Elena's heart drummed in her ribs. We'll be all right, she said softly. Yet though she wasn't sure any cabin in the region could stand much longer, thunder cracked outside, sharp and sudden, the kind that came only during the worst winter storms. The wind howled through gaps in the wood. A shudder ran through the floor, as if the earth itself had flinched. Daniel looked toward the ceiling. Is it going to fall too? Elena didn't answer. She didn't need to. They all heard it. The deep splintering groan of heavy beams beginning to fail. Martha pressed her hands to her mouth. Lord, help us. Elena stood up fast. Get your blankets. All of you. We are leaving the cabin. Leaving? Martha stared at her as if she'd lost her mind. We can't step into that storm again. We're not going outside, Elena said. We're going down. She grabbed the edge of the thick spruce boards under the kitchen table and pulled. The trap door lifted, revealing a dark opening and the top of a ladder disappearing below. Warm air drifted up from the hidden cache. Stable, calm, nothing like the chaos above. Martha blinked at it. You built this under your home? Yes. How deep is it? Deep enough to keep us alive? The cabin moaned again. Snow rattled across the roof. Somewhere outside, something heavy crashed against the wall. There was no more time to explain. Elena pushed the blankets into Martha's arms. Go down first with Daniel. I'm right behind you. Martha hesitated only a second before helping her son onto the ladder. Elena steadied him as he climbed down into the glow of the lantern below. Then Martha followed. The moment they were inside, Elena lowered the trapdoor. The wind outside screamed as if furious at losing them. At the bottom of the ladder, Daniel stood staring at the stone walls with wide, startled eyes. The cache stayed warm, its air fresh from the hidden ventilation shafts. The lantern light flickered across the tight stonework, lining every side. Martha touched the wall with her fingertips. It's warm, she whispered. How is that possible? The earth holds heat, Elena said. The cold can't take it fast enough. Before Martha could answer, a violent crash sounded above them. Dust drifted from the ceiling. A second crash followed, louder, now sharp enough to make Daniel jump. The cabin, Martha whispered. It's coming down. All three froze. A long, splintering crack tore through the air above. The sound rolled across the ceiling like thunder trapped inside the wood. Elena held her breath, waiting for the next blow. It came seconds later. An explosive snap as one of the main beams failed. Martha clutched Daniel tight. Is it safe? Is this place safe? Elena steadied her voice. These walls are supported by earth, not air. They're stronger than anything above. The storm clawed at the world overhead, but inside the cache, the temperature didn't move. The lantern glowed steady. The stone walls stood firm. Hours crawled by. Outside, the storm reached a level Elena had never heard in her life. At one point, something enormous smashed across the roof. The vibration traveled through ground and into the stone beneath their feet. Even Martha, shaking from fear, admitted quietly, "If we were up there, we'd be gone." Later in the night, another sound reached them. Soft at first, then louder, a scraping, a shove, a muffled cry for help. Elena grabbed her lantern and moved toward the low tunnel leading to the hillside exit. Snow was pushing into the small gaps, but the door still held. Then she heard it again, a weak, shaking voice. "Elena, Elena, are you there?" She knew that voice. It belonged to the last man she expected, Jack Harlan, the loudest critic of her entire hidden project. "Open it," Martha whispered. Elena pulled the sod-covered door inward. Jack collapsed into the tunnel, covered in ice and snow, barely able to crawl. Well, he had come to the one place he once said would become her grave, and now it was the only thing keeping him alive. Jack Harlan lay on the stone floor, gasping like he had run miles uphill instead of crawling 20 feet through a tunnel. His hands were torn from the cold. His beard was thick with frozen snow. He looked up at Elena with eyes full of shame and something deeper. Fear. "I tried to make it to the climb place," he rasped. "Didn't know it was gone. Couldn't see anything. Wind knocked me off my feet. I thought I was done for." Elena didn't say anything. She wrapped him in a blanket and helped him sit against the wall. Martha gave him warm water. Daniel held the lantern closer so they could see his frostbitten fingers. Jack swallowed hard. "I kept thinking about what you built and how I laughed at you, but I almost died because I didn't listen." "You're here now," Elena said. "That's enough." She did not say it unkindly. The storm kept hammering the world above. But down here, the cache stayed steady at 52 degrees. The stone walls did not move. The earth insulated them from the worst the sky could throw. The lantern flickered, but the air never grew thin. The small room held life in a region where death was walking freely. Hours blurred into each other. Martha and Daniel rested. Jack drifted between sleep and pain. Elena remained alert, listening for any new sound from above. Near dawn, something changed. Silence, not complete silence. The wind was still moving, but it no longer roared like a living thing trying to tear the land apart. It had weakened. It had surrendered. Elena stood beneath the trapdoor and pressed her hand against it. Cold radiated through the wood. She pushed lightly, but it didn't budge. Snow was piled on top. They waited 3 more hours before the storm eased enough for Elena to try again. This time, the trap door shifted a little. She fetched a wooden pole and used it to wedge the door up step by step until a narrow crack of pale daylight showed through. When the 4 of them climbed out together, the sight stole the breath from their lungs. The cabin was half gone. The entire north wall had collapsed outward. The stove lay broken under a pile of ice. The shingles were torn off. Snow was knee-deep across the floor. The roof sagged low, barely hanging on. If they had stayed even 1 hour longer in this cabin, they would not have survived. But Elena walked outside and stared into the valley. What she saw was worse than she feared. Trees snapped in half. Fences flattened. Neighboring cabins buried so deep only their chimneys showed. The path to the trading post vanished, under drifts taller than a man. Martha stepped out behind her, Daniel clutching her hand. Tears filled her eyes. "Elena, if we hadn't come to you, if you hadn't built this place..." Jack limped out of the cabin and looked at the hillside door that saved him. His voice cracked. "I mocked you in front of the whole settlement. Said you were wasting your time. Said you didn't know this land. Turns out you understood it better than all of us." Elena lowered her eyes. "I only remember what my grandmother taught me." "Well," Jack said quietly, "your grandmother just saved this region more than any preacher or trapper ever did." They spent the next 3 days digging out nearby homesteads, leading people back to Elena's hidden cache when they had nowhere else to go. The storm had killed livestock, crushed barns, and destroyed cabins. But not a single person who reached Elena's refuge died. Word spread fast. By spring, families were visiting Elena's ruined cabin, not to offer pity, but to learn. She showed them the stonework, the ventilation, the tunnel, the way the earth itself held heat when the sky tried to take it. Jack rebuilt his cabin with a hidden cache beneath the floor. Martha asked Elena to help design one for her new place. Daniel followed Elena everywhere, asking questions, carrying stones, learning how each piece locked into the next. That summer, 7 more refuge rooms were dug in the region, and when another winter storm hit the following January, every family who built one survived without fear. The area changed that year. People no longer looked at Elena as the strange widow who dug holes under her house. They looked at her as the woman who showed them how to outsmart the worst winter Alaska could bring. She never called herself a hero. She never asked for credit. When someone thanked her, she always said the same thing. I just built what I needed. And it turned out others needed it, too. Many years later, long after Elena passed, the cabin was gone, but the stone cache remained. Visitors to the remote area could step inside it, feel the steady warmth in the walls, and read a small sign placed near the entrance, built by Elena Petrova in 1873, a reminder that wisdom is not always loud, but always survives. Her refuge room became her legacy, a legacy built in silence.